High atop the Acropolis in Athens, Greece, stands one of the most magnificent and most aesthetically pleasing structures in the world, the Parthenon. This 23,000 square foot temple was constructed using 100,000 tons of radiant white marble. The exterior of the Parthenon is lined with 46 colossal columns, which strikingly appear to be laid out in the shape of an exact rectangle. And what's more astonishing is that the more than 13,000 stone blocks used to assemble the Parthenon were precisely fitted together without the use of mortar. Which begs the question, how were the ancient Greeks able to build something that looks so perfect?
The Parthenon is an amazingly beautiful structure. The design, the spacing of each stone is so perfect that it inspires just to look at. The proportions are so exact. For a large building, it is an amazing thing. And it lifts the spirit upward.
Built beginning in 447 BC on the orders of the famed statesman and general Pericles, the Parthenon celebrates the Athenians' victory over Persian invaders who had tried to conquer the city for 50 years.
Athens, during the time of the building of the Parthenon, is an incredible, cosmopolitan, vibrant city. It's producing art, literature, sculpture, architecture. It's the Manhattan of the 5th century BC. And I think if you're an Athenian citizen walking, doing your everyday work, and then you see the Acropolis in the center of the city, this incredible shining hill, and then you see the Parthenon, the gleaming marble, the biggest and most beautiful Greek temple that existed at least in mainland Greece at this point, you'd be filled with a sense of wonder.
Although most of the interior of the Parthenon has decayed due to the ravages of time, the rectangular symmetry of its exterior looks flawless to this day. But strangely, for a temple that was clearly built with perfection in mind, what makes the Parthenon so fascinating is actually its imperfections.
Not only were the Greeks masters of geometry, they were also masters of optical illusions. They knew the fact that your eye plays tricks on you. Therefore, they built the Parthenon slightly incorrectly, quote unquote, to compensate for this so that the net result is perfection.
The Parthenon is a rectangle, but there are no right angles in the entire building. Everything is slightly off. The columns look straight from below, but they are slightly tilted toward each other. So if you were standing at the base of the Parthenon, and if the columns didn't stop after a certain number of feet, but they kept on going all the way up into the sky, you would see the columns meeting if they were long enough to actually meet. This is a very curious thing that the builders did.
It turns out that the Parthenon does not have straight parallel lines at all. The columns are not vertically cylindrical at all. They bulge by about an inch at the center of the cylinder. So for example, if the human brain looking at a column will actually think that the waist is pinched, your eye thinks that the center of the cylinder is shrunk. To compensate for that, the columns of the Parthenon bulge. There's no way this could have been an accident.
But is that all the Greeks were trying to achieve? An optical illusion? Or could they have had another purpose in mind when they built the Parthenon?
Why do we create monuments like the Parthenon? And the answer is, we want to try and imitate the divine. The divine was seen as perfection. The gods are seen as perfection. And so sacred geometry has been incorporated into the Parthenon in the belief that it was now endowed with some kind of divine power. And this was done very specifically to connect the mundane with the divine. to create the connection between this world and the next.
Is the unique design of the Parthenon some kind of attempt to connect to a higher power? According to some researchers, the answer is yes. And they claim that the fact that the Parthenon still stands and that it still looks perfect and pleasing to the eye is a testament to what its architects were striving to build. Something eternal, everlasting, and perhaps divine. Athens, Greece. Within this modern city stands the ruins of a citadel that was once the center of ancient Greece. The ancient Greek civilization lasted for more than 3 centuries. The Greeks developed a sophisticated culture, which had a profound impact on Western politics, science, and philosophy. One of the best-known Greek philosophers was Plato, who wrote more than 20 important philosophical texts known as dialogues.
Plato was doing his major writing in the 4th century BCE, and Plato's works are very serious, very sober philosophical reflections on major questions. He is really the most important philosopher in the Western world.
For most of Western civilization, Plato is the basis for our thinking and philosophy. But he's also partially a historian. And his work is still used in order to identify the way life was in antiquity.
Of all the influential writings of Plato, the one that is perhaps the most fascinating and the most mysterious is his account of a lost civilization that existed centuries before the rise of ancient Greece. Atlantis.
Atlantis is a very important story in Western imagination. In the year 359 before the Common Era, Plato, the great philosopher, told a story about a continent, a large island, out in the Atlantic Ocean, and it became a very powerful nation.
It was home to a fabulous civilization that began as the byword for justice and compassion. It had a huge navy that it used to travel from place to place around the Mediterranean.
Plato tells us in his dialogues that the information came from a famous statesman who visited Egypt by the name of Solon a few centuries before.
Plato wrote that Solon traveled to northern Egypt and entered a sacred temple dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Neith. Within the temple was a column completely covered with hieroglyphics on which the history of Atlantis was recorded. Egyptian priests told Solon the story of this lost civilization, which predated the Egyptians themselves.
Egyptians would recount the story of Atlantis as a major part of where their civilization came from, where they got a lot of their knowledge. This was a very advanced and technological civilization, and Plato is reporting this as a very important story for the ancient Egyptians.
Pretty much like the next day after Plato writes this, people start debating whether or not it was true. Did Plato mean this as a fictional story, or was Plato talking about a historical occurrence?
While it may sound like the stuff of fantasy, in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, Plato provides a wealth of detail about what many believe was a very real island nation.
Plato described Atlantis as being a huge landmass, potentially in the Atlantic Ocean. One of the main design specs of Atlantis was this huge area at the center of the main city of Atlantis that had concentric circles of land and canals. And it had a canal coming out that went to the sea, and a great port was built there.
The concentric circles of navigable canals suggest a well-planned early marina. It is strongly oriented to the sea. In the temple, on the Acropolis, at the center of Atlantis, there is a statue of Poseidon, the creator god of the place. And he's got winged horses, a chariot with horses that can fly, so there is also a transcendent dimension implied.
But if such a transcendent, awe-inspiring place actually existed, what happened to it? According to Plato, the Atlanteans angered the gods with their pride, what the Greeks called hubris. And you definitely don't want to do that.
Atlantis got more and more vain, more and more abusive in their hubris, a kind of arrogance that was saying, we are gods. That vanity of thinking that we are as important as the gods tends to upset the gods, and then the downfall comes. The downfall that is in every Greek tragic play is the same thing. People of great privilege are brought down.
Atlantis disappeared in a day and a night due to some natural catastrophe, and it ended up under the waves.
The gods came and destroyed the whole place. The people were killed, the navy was destroyed, all in a day. And Atlantis sinks into the sea.
When Plato talks about this catastrophic destruction of Atlantis, I have to take him seriously. And the people would say, oh, it's just a metaphor, Atlantis. Every metaphor has at its base a nucleus of historical information. So even if he fictionalized it, even if he elaborated it, at its nucleus, it's a real historical place.
Constantinople, 678 AD. For 4 long years, Arab forces have laid siege to the capital of the Byzantine Empire. But then the Byzantines risk a daring counterattack and unleash a devastating inferno. Streams of flame shoot out from Byzantine vessels, lighting the water on fire and incinerating the Arab ships. This fearsome weapon would come to be known as Greek fire.
Greek fire was one of the most formidable weapons of its era. Imagine your ship suddenly being engulfed in flames that were almost impossible to extinguish. Not only was there this immense physical danger, but there was also a massive psychological impact. The loud roar of the flames, the sight of it, the sound of it, was really enough to put terror into these Arab forces.
At sea, Greek fire was very useful because if there's something a mariner really has a fear of, it's being set light to on a ship because there's nowhere to go. And so Greek fire had a terrifying aspect to it, setting light to ships and burning people.
Throughout the Middle Ages, the Byzantine Empire used Greek fire to strike fear into the hearts of fighting men. But how did the Byzantines develop such a powerful weapon of mass destruction?
Greek fire acquired its name simply because the Byzantines spoke Greek. It was quite mysterious because it was very quickly established as a state secret of the Byzantine Empire. So we don't have a really good, clear idea of what its constituents were or precisely how it operated. But we do know that it was a very effective weapons system.
While the exact formula of Greek fire may be lost to history, experts have proposed several theories regarding the composition of this fiery concoction.
Most scholars agree that the basic constituent materials were probably naphtha, a naturally occurring hydrocarbon, mixed with pine resin. The naphtha provided the flammability, and the pine resin thickened the substance and caused it to burn longer once it had been ignited.
The secret to Greek fire being used on water is probably the addition of quicklime, which likely gave it an explosive quality that allowed it to burn and have much more damage on water. In fact, the water played a role in perpetuating the reaction and causing the burning to increase.
There is certainly speculation as to the different recipes for Greek fire. But it would be very difficult to say what the classic Greek fire actually is. And nobody has actually recreated it with perfect accuracy.
In ancient times, running was not only used as a means of stalking prey, it was also a method of long-range communication.
Running served a vital purpose for the ancient Greeks. They served as couriers or messengers. They were essentially the ancient mail system for the Greeks. And it was vital for military strategy in particular.
In antiquity, the best way to convey messages, especially matters of war, matters of religion and so forth, was to send a himerodromos. So that's the Greek word for a day runner. It was a special class of people specifically trained for this and specifically equipped physiologically, not only to deliver a message in a timely fashion, but to do it over very rugged terrain, over several hundred miles. So in that regard, the extent to which a himerodromos can perform these amazing feats would suggest that it requires a kind of superhuman ability.
In the case of Dean Karnazes, his superhuman running ability may be due to the fact that he is actually of Greek descent.
I think my ability to run long distances is influenced definitely by my Greek heritage. I'm 100% Greek, and Greece is the birthplace of long-distance running, and I've known that for a long time. I think I have the natural ability to run long distances from my heritage, but having the will to do it is another thing. And I think I just have the will to do it.